Hi, I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from Your Black World, and today something happened to me that kind of freaked me out a little bit. Um, I went on to HLN, which is the sister network of CNN, and I've been on CNN and HLN a lot, more times than I can count, maybe 200 times or something. But this appearance was different from any other because I've never really been shut down like that before. Toward the end of the interview, Jane Velez Mitchell, whose show I was on, she literally chopped me off like kind of at mid sentence and they took me off the panel, largely because I mentioned something that one of my bloggers had reported on culturecritic.com, in which she talked about an interview that was done with a neighbor of Michael Dunn. Michael Dunn is the man who was accused of killing Jordan Davis, the 17-year-old who was playing his music too loud. And the reason Jordan Dunn killed him, I believe, was because he had road rage. It was road rage at a gas station. There's a whole narrative being built around Jordan Davis being a thug and being scary, being intimidating. And what's interesting to me about that case is that none of these arguments would even apply if Jordan Davis were a white woman, or even if he were a white man. If Michael Dunn were black and Jordan Davis were white, Michael Dunn would already have been convicted. I really believe that. But here's the funny thing. So I brought up this interview, and during the interview, the neighbor, it's with the police detectives that are the leads on the case. We've reached out to the Jacksonville police to try to verify the actual audio, just to make 100% sure it's exactly what we think it is. But the most they would verify is that these are the detectives that are leading the case. And if you listen to the audio, we just put it out there. You can take a listen to it. It's on culturecritic.com and just try to see what you think. But basically, in this audio, this guy is really painting a picture of Dunn that's less than favorable. He's literally implying that Dunn asked him to help him have somebody killed. He's literally saying that Dunn committed various forms of financial fraud, that he was an intimidating person, that he was a lot like George Zimmerman, just a yahoo who just goes off the handle and thinks he can pull out his gun and kill people, thinks he can control situations that he's not meant to control. And so, I think this case was interesting because I really got annoyed listening to the case a little bit, because as a black man, you get tired of people somehow finding some reason that you deserve to be killed. It's no different from people believing that a promiscuous woman deserves to be raped. People tend to believe that a black male, a young black male, deserves to die. If somebody shot him, there had to be a reason. Almost like shooting a wild goat or some sort of animal in the woods. They're like, okay, give me a reason. Explain to me why the bear was attacking you, and I'll buy anything that will let you off the hook. And that's kind of what's happening here. And what's amazing to me is that people keep sort of going back to this fear that this guy shot up this car because he was afraid. And I'm like, okay, so that gives him a reason to shoot people. That's the first question you have to ask. The second question you have to ask is, what does a man do when he's in fear? He tries to, duck for cover. He tries to protect himself. This person didn't do that. He was the aggressor at every turn. He came after the car and said, "Can you turn your music down?" And then he started yelling back and forth. And then he pulled out the gun. He shot up the car, and then he left. Then he ran away and didn't go back to the police until they came after him, because he thought he could get away with killing a young black man. And he's not entirely incorrect. I mean, there are a lot of places where you can kill black men and get away with it. My best friend was murdered in 1996, Greg Wilkins, and his killers are still at large. I mean, the easiest way to get away with a crime really is to kill a young black man, unfortunately. So this case really bothers me because the arguments that they're hinging on are all built on pathetic racial stereotypes. It's all built on this idea that says that black men are so damn scary that even when they don't have a weapon, even when there's no sign of aggression, that somehow I had to shoot him. If I shot a black man, I've got an excuse. And I think that we shouldn't take excuses like that. I think we should call the bullshit for what it is. Excuse my French. I think that this justice system is atrocious. We know how atrocious it is. We know how racially biased it is. And I think this case really is a microcosm of exactly what black men go through all over the country. I can think of so many times where people thought I was intimidating because I was wearing a wife beater and had muscles or whatever. It was just silly things, and it's just not fair. I mean, it's unfair because it takes away the humanity of the black man, and people believe that black men, not only that we are hardened thugs and we enjoy pain, we enjoy hurting people, but also we don't love our children. That's why the narrative of the black male abandoning his kids is so popular, even amongst a lot of black men and a lot of black women believe that black men just don't love their kids. That somehow, and think about that. Think about that. Every human being on earth is wired to love their children, but yet somehow there are people that are wired, that are taught to believe that black men don't love their kids. Why would you think that about any group of people? Well, you only think that if you don't think that they're entirely human, because a fundamental part of your humanity is the love for your children. So ultimately, I would just say that this case, it bothers me and annoys me. I have no idea if CNN is going to have me back. They called me this week and they said they wanted, they're like, Dr. Watkins, we want to have you on all week to talk about this trial. And I don't really like to do any media at all. I only do CNN because my business manager tells me that I need to do it. And and I've been banned from CNN before. I don't know if you follow me long enough, you'll know about this. Back in '07, I got into it with Bill O'Reilly, the man who's entirely full of shit and who I refuse to validate just because he's got a bunch of racists who watch his show. And we got into it, and basically when the stuff hit the fan. I was banned. I would before that I was on CNN almost every other day. I was on Fox almost every other day. Before I knew how racist Fox was. After that, I deliberately told Fox I'm not appearing on your network anymore, which I haven't done. I've done Fox Business maybe a couple times to talk about college athletes and compensation, which is something I'm passionate about. But I will not do Fox News. In fact, I have a big issue with President Obama really demeaning himself and demeaning his office by even acknowledging a bigot like Bill O'Reilly. We know Bill O'Reilly's an idiot. We know he's a racist. We know he's a jerk. So why do you acknowledge him just because a bunch of bigots follow him? I mean, that's just I think that is really that's really a way to weaken and compromise our values. We're watering down who we are when we acknowledge somebody just because they have a big audience or just because that person's rich. That's another thing. When it comes to wealth, people do that too. They think that because somebody has a lot of money, that automatically morphs them into a good person. Well, no, you're not a good person to me just because you have money, just because you have power. I need to know how did you get that money? How did you get that power? If you can't answer those questions in a way that makes sense to me, then I'm not going to respect you. In fact, I'm going to disrespect you that much more because you built an empire of bullshit. A big building is not a beautiful building if it's 10 stories of shit. So understand that, stand by your principles. And so long story short, with the CNN thing, I have no idea how they're going to react for the rest of the week. They probably think I'm just a hurricane because I brought up this interview and I was like, well, we're not in the court of law. And I said, well, I did see an interview and Jane Velez kind of pushed me to talk about it. So I was like, okay, well, the guy said blah, blah, blah. So they shut it down pretty quick. And the truth be told, in a way, it might be kind of a relief because I'm so busy. And, just so you know, sitting in front of the camera for 2 hours, it's not as glamorous as people might make you think it is. I mean, I try to appreciate it because I know there are a lot of people who literally would love to be on CNN one time. So I don't take it for granted. But, when you got kids, your kids calling you and your people that work for you calling you and you got work to do and stuff to do, you just came back from a trip. Sitting in front of the camera 2 hours is kind of tough, especially if you're only talking once every 15 minutes. And that's kind of what we were doing today. And so, but I appreciate the chance to, go and speak my piece. But honestly, the reason I created Your Black World is because even if you are kind of the favored Negro, so to speak, as I call it, and whites or mainstream media adopts you for a while, understand that, as quick as they adopt you, they can drop you. Just because they're using you doesn't mean that they love you. So you always have to be prepared for the fact that if you don't own something of your own, have a place to call your own, you're always vulnerable to other people. So that goes for having your own business. That goes for having, when you talk about black media, I think black media needs to be independent. For example, when I got shut down and I couldn't say what needed to be said about this young man and preserving his legacy, which I think has been tarnished by this trial, I was shut down by the so-called liberals who love black people so much. But the truth is that ain't nobody going to ever love you the way you need to be loved except for you. And if you don't love yourself, then nobody loves you. If maybe God loves you, but I think God might even be looking at you and saying, why don't you love yourself more? Why don't you do more for yourself? Why don't you empower yourself more? So the part of the reason that I wasn't offended that Jane shut me down, that I didn't get to talk much, and why I wasn't really trying to bogart and jump into the conversation is because I know I have other avenues that I've created over the years, spent my own money trying to build all this stuff. And I have my own avenues to communicate with my people when I want to. And truth be told, again, call me whatever you want, but I enjoy talking to black people. I don't enjoy trying to explain myself all the time to the liberal gatekeepers or the conservative gatekeepers or these folks that feel like they own us. I don't want to explain myself. Sometimes when I talk to a black man, that's a conversation for me and him. It's not a conversation for anybody else. May not be politically correct. It may not be what other people want to hear. But guess what? No, nobody has a right to tell you what you're allowed to do and who you're allowed to talk to and what you're allowed to talk about or how long you're allowed to talk or what tone you're allowed to take when you speak and communicate. So when I talk to black people, I talk to them in a way that is as honest and as authentic as I can possibly come up with. I don't care what anybody else thinks. I am glad, when CNN calls, I say thank you. When like Democracy Now! Called this week, I was like, thank you. But honestly, I look at, all of them with a side eye. And the thing is that there's a historical context here. I mean, Dr. King told us a long time ago, beware of white liberals, because that same person who protects you and supports you may unfortunately gain a paternalistic desire to control you and manage you and look at you. And they implicitly understand, they always understand what your place is and what their place is. And when you get out of your place, that's when they're going to check you. So independence is the key. I don't believe in necessarily separationism, but I do believe that, because I think we have to work together. I think we benefit from doing business with whites and working with whites to a point. But I think at the same time, you got to own your own stuff. You have to have your own avenues for success, because if you're waiting on other people to deliver to you what God meant for you to have, you're going to go crazy. I mean, if I was sitting around Syracuse University, where I taught for 12 years, in May, I think that's when I'm going to bounce out of there. If I was sitting around Syracuse University waiting for those people to acknowledge me and acknowledge the work that I've been doing, all those years I spent in school trying to get that PhD, which was hard as hell. I didn't finish school till I was 31. I mean, who wants to be in school that long? Imagine studying 8 to 10 hours a day, year round, 7 days a week, including summers, for almost a decade. That's pretty much what I had to do. And it was hard. Finance is not like every other field. Finance is hard as hell. I mean, we make the most money on campus. That's why everybody tries to get into our field. So I was competing against some pretty smart people. And it paid off. I mean, when I went to Syracuse, I was actually the highest paid assistant professor or associate professor on the entire campus, even though I was only an assistant professor. And that was because in finance, the money is so good. But the thing is, though, no matter what I've accomplished, no matter what I've done outside of the campus, if a bigot is controlling the space within which you operate, that bigot will never acknowledge you, just out of sheer defiance. Unless you kick him in the nuts and force him to acknowledge something, most of the time, if you're waiting for the descendants of your historical oppressors to acknowledge you and tell you that you're worthy, you're not only going to be waiting for a long time, but you're going to go to the crazy house on your way there. So through the years, I never got a raise. I never got promoted. I never got acknowledged. I would be on CNN 15, 20, 30 times and they wouldn't say anything. Whereas the professor down the hall would be on the local news once and they would talk about it like it was a big deal. And a lot of it was because I spoke on issues that they felt uncomfortable with. I talked about things that related to African Americans. I talked about black males. I talked about racism and racial inequality. And in that campus, I didn't expect anything better from that. I mean, when I walked in, I said, wait a minute, you have almost 100 faculty in the business school and you haven't hired one single black person? And I knew it wasn't because here's the thing, they will tell you that the reason they never hired a black person is because they never found a black person who's good enough. Lordy be, no black person has ever been qualified to work here, but that's bullshit. If you believe that, you are stupid. If you believe that diversity crap, you are dumb. And I don't call people dumb that often. But the fact is that that's a ploy. That's a lie. By believing that, you have disrespected your ancestors who worked just as hard as you, who tried to accomplish just as much, who pushed just as hard for their families to get the same thing that you have right now, but the walls were just so high or the barriers were so thick that they weren't able to get there. And so ultimately what would happen is all these black people would apply for the same job and none of them would get the job, and they always find a reason not to give it to that person. The only reason I got that job was because there was one person there who truly cared about diversity at that time who said, we need to hire some black people because y'all ain't hired a black finance professor in 100 years. 100, think about that. 100 years. Imagine if we went 100 years without hiring a white person at General Electric or at Harvard University. Imagine the outrage. But they went 100 years without hiring a black person. So why is it that when I tell you the first thing, it's shocking, but when I tell you the second, the latter, it's like business as usual? Because I believe that to some extent we've accepted second-class citizenship. And I don't believe in accepting second-class citizenship. If you want to know what I really think about that, I'll be blunt with you. Fuck that. We are strong people. We are meant to be great. And I just encourage you to push yourself to excellence. No excuses. Don't give up on the things you want. No fear. Don't let anybody scare you into doing things you don't want to do or being somebody you don't want to be. I mean, have some sense. I mean, don't go pick battles that are gonna tear you down or that are gonna hurt other people unnecessarily. But don't be afraid and don't buy into this crap. So I didn't mean to go off on that big tangent. As you know, sometimes I just get into this free flow of thought, and I hope that what I've said has been helpful to you enough to make it worth this 15 minutes and 26 seconds I've been talking. I think it's because I got a new Macintosh, and I'm just excited. I just wanted to try it out. But anyway, I just thought I would tell that story about what happened on CNN. I thought it was hilarious. I was sitting there like, oh man, I done got in trouble. And you know, when I was a baby, my mother was 17 years old when she gave birth to me, and my biological father, he wasn't there. I just say that. I don't know why exactly, but I know he wasn't there. And my mother used to always tell me, she said, boy, your mouth will either make you great or get you killed. I'm curious to see which one. So I think tonight, my mouth, at the very least, it got me kicked off the segment. So, but fortunately, it doesn't matter because all I want to do is talk to you because you are the people I love, and you know, everything else is just, you know, part of the job. So until we meet again, please stay strong, be blessed, and be educated. I am gone. Peace.